Hey everyone, it's time for another edition of Beaver Banter.
Beaver Sports Talk lives here.
It is the Beaver Banter podcast presented by Bemidji State Alumni and Foundation. I'm CJ Baumgartner, Ian Rivers over there. Ian, always another great week to be a Beaver, but as we take a look at men's hockey action over the weekend against UND, you have the loss at the Sanford Center on Friday night. You go to Saturday and kind of feels like you were the better hockey team, but ultimately Bemidji State has a loss and an overtime loss in the rivalry series against the team from North Dakota. Ian, just kind of break down your thoughts. Let's just start on Friday night. What'd you kind of notice?
Friday was weird, man, because I feel like they played pretty poorly, but at the same time, you still feel like the game was right there for them. And I guess that's hockey to a certain extent. Like, things can change in the blink of an eye more so than any other sport. I like the first 10 minutes, like really up until Connor McLennan scored a goal for the Beavers to make it 1-0. And then North Dakota, it's almost like that woke North Dakota up a little bit and kind of got them playing well. Like, I think the Beavers were leading shots at that point by a considerable margin. I think in the next 20 minutes of game time on the ice, they had like 2 or 3 shots total, did the Beavers, to like maybe 20 from North Dakota in that same time frame. They just dominated over the course of the rest of the game. And the Beavers would make these plays and they would get back into it. Jake McLean scored a goal after North Dakota had taken the lead to make it 2-2. And then we give up a shorthanded goal. You know, we go on the power play. We just scored. We go on the power play. It's like, okay, maybe this is when we start climbing back into the game. And we give up a shorty. And then we answer the shorty. Max Vig gets his third goal of the season, I believe, just a couple minutes later. And so it's like 3-3. The Beavers are not playing as good as North Dakota is, but they're sticking around. And, you know, as an underdog, that's really all you got to do sometimes is just be there at the end of the game. And they did end up giving up another power play goal before the second period ended to make it 4-3. And then couldn't punch one in the third to tie the game. North Dakota added an empty netter with just 6 seconds remaining and won 5-3. And, you know, I really didn't know how to feel. Like, I felt frustrated, but I couldn't tell if I was more frustrated with just the fact that the Beavers played that poorly or whether or not, like, they played that poorly and yet it still felt like they could have been in that game because they did miss some chances. Like, I don't remember the last time this team – outside of maybe Max Nemetsnikov's shorthanded goal last weekend, like, it feels like every time they have a breakaway or a 2-on-1, it doesn't happen for them. Like, I don't know why. I don't know what it is with this team. But you know what? We said that about the power play for like a 3-week stretch this year too, and now the power play is working just fine. So we'll see. Maybe once we get back from Christmas break, like, this whole breakaway thing will be a thing of the past. But yeah, I don't know. I think it was probably the right outcome just based off of how the game went. You could have seen it be a lot worse. Like, you know, maybe this game wasn't so far off from that Duluth game where we lost like 7-3 or whatever it was. It just happened that we played a little bit better in the goaltending area, or, you know, we got a couple extra chances of our own. But yeah, probably a fair result to get a loss on that game. Saturday, though, was much better.
Was really the one where it was like, that was the one where you go, all right, they got the better of us that night. But Saturday was the one where if you come away with a win and you've kind of outplayed them, you feel like, hey, there we go. Like, we'll take a split. We'll take a win in the Ralph. And Bemidji State took it to overtime, but just couldn't quite get the opportunity. What did you see?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great game from the Beavers. I really liked what I saw. It started off again. I mean, the Beavers just had that jump right from the get-go. Even more so, I thought, on Saturday, as opposed to Friday.
Right.
It didn't result in a goal.
Too about, like, going into I'm not giving UND credit in the slightest, but of course you go into the Ralph, you're against UND. Like, there's a little bit of kind of some ways that can kind of amp you up and get ready to be a road warrior. You know what I mean?
You're playing in front of 11,000 people as opposed to 1,100 people. Like, that
gets people fired up too. That definitely does.
Even if you're on the opposing side, like you just,
Right.
it kind of like you try and match that level. Sometimes you can get overwhelmed by it and sometimes it raises your level of play. I'm not saying that's 100% want to win into all of it, but sometimes you see that effect of like, you kind of end up getting amped up. And yeah, like you said, it looked like right off the jump, they were ready to play and ready to kind of wash the bad taste out of their mouth. That was Friday night. But yeah, they looked really strong.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just over the course of the whole night too. Ben Strinden gets a goal in the second period, because of course he did. It was a good shot, good goal. And you think, okay, this stinks because now at that point in time, it had felt like the Beavers had kind of fallen to the back foot yet again, just like they did the last night. And now this was the straw that was going to break the camel's back. And we're going to look at the score line at the end of the game, and it's going to be like 4-0 North Dakota or something like that. But the Beavers had a really good response to that goal. Just in terms of overall play, obviously they get a goal about 6 minutes later from Casper Magnuson and Adam Flemang with the assists. So the top line gets involved again after a pretty quiet weekend up to that point. And then the game stayed tied all the way throughout. But, man, especially in the third period, I thought the Beavers were playing really well. I thought they had a lot of great chances. They had, I think, better chances than UND did in that period. And then it gets to overtime, and, it stinks because it's like, well, now the best we can get is an overtime win. But an overtime win is still very good on the road against the top 6 team in the country. And, I mean, Kirkland Irie, he desperately needs to find a goal. I mean, it's clear that he's got some, I don't necessarily think it's a confidence issue, but what it would do, I think, for Kirkland Irie to see a puck go in the back of the net and to get his game back to where we saw it last season, because he had a bit of a difficult overtime, struggled on a pass, and, goes right into I think it went into a North Dakota player's skates and ended up taking a penalty on that play, which gave North Dakota a power play in overtime, which they scored on and won the game. So we played pretty well in that game, and it stinks to come out with just an overtime loss that's not going to do you any favors at this point after going, just 2-6 with one overtime loss in non-conference play. Like, it's just not good enough to be able to help you, especially when those 2 wins were only against Alaska Anchorage, who
was just about to say that.
Yeah. That's not really going to boost you up in the NPI. So unfortunately, it looks like yet another season where the Beavers will have to play for the conference and the conference alone, which
we
I don't know.
Knew going into it anyways. I don't even know if sweeping UND, like even sweeping them, would have really done.
I think sweeping them would have.
Sweeping them might have. Okay.
Would have at least given you a chance, where we're playing so well in conference play that I do think that would have jumped us, I think, probably into the top 20 of the NPI. And then if you can just stay pretty consistent in conference like you have done, I think that there's a chance that they still would have had an at-large berth, but that would have relied on you sweeping.
Yeah, a lot of ifs. But yeah, the point is like we probably knew going into this one that in all likelihood the path to the NCAA tournament is through the CCHA. And there are some things where you go, it's frustrating, like you mentioned, some of the things about the series against UND, but I think overall I really do take a lot of stock. I choose to ignore the bad parts and glorify the good parts. And that's what I'm doing this weekend with the UND series, because just the way they played on Saturday at the Ralph gave me pretty good confidence for what this team can do as they're trying to get into the CCHA. And we know that winning the CCHA is going to be the only path this team has to getting into the NCAA tournament. The good news is Bemidji State has a really good opportunity just on the way the conference is shaking out. Not saying they will, but I mean, things are kind of laid out for them. If you look at CCHA standings right now, Minnesota State, of course, leapfrogged us over the weekend. They get the sweep.
Northern almost took a point off of them, or 2.
Almost.
Like, they almost got to overtime. They almost did.
Northern Michigan, by the way, no points in 8 conference games so far. They're in last. Minnesota State, 24 points, again in first place through 10 games. Bemidji State, 23 points through 10. Bowling Green, 19 points through 10. Michigan Tech, 16 points through 10. Augustana, 15 points through 9 games. St. Thomas, 12 points through 7. Lake State, 9 points through 10 games. Ferris State, 5 points through 8 games. Northern Michigan, as we mentioned, in the bottom there. It is kind of nice to have those games games in hand, kind of the gap made up for the majority of the teams that Bemidji State is going to be concerned about over the course of the season. When you talk about Minnesota State and Bowling Green and things like that. But overall, Bemidji State is going to be in the thick of things, and they're going to have an opportunity again this weekend with Augustana, a team that they took, majority of points off of when they played at the Sanford Center. But this is going to be the first time Bemidji State makes that road trip back to Sioux Falls since the playoff series where Bemidji State got the upset in the opening round of the Mason Cup playoffs last year. And I'm sure that's going to stick in the minds of Augie as Bemidji State tries to go in there. But opportunity on the table, Ian, for Bemidji State to really put it all out on the line, because after this, they are off until January 9th and 10th against Michigan Tech at home. I know there's an exhibition against the Gophers on January 2nd, but in terms of games that matter, you're going to take pretty much a month off. So it's really important that, for a couple of reasons, you have a really great series against Augustana. One, because you don't want to let a bad series sit in your mouth for a month, but also you got to keep pace. You want to try and get those points. And this is an opportunity here, if Bemidji State can have a good weekend against Augustana, to put them down and kind of keep them away from really making a run in the standings. If Augustana can get majority points, all of a sudden things get a little more cluttered in the top half of the conference.
Yeah, this is a huge weekend. I mean, every weekend feels like it's a huge weekend. Like, we just came off of a weekend against Northern Michigan a couple weeks ago where it's like, okay, this is a winless team, but it just makes it a huge weekend for a different reason, right?
Right.
Like, it's
every conference game matters. It just depends on why it matters.
Right, exactly. But this one feels big because of the fact that you don't play another game for over a month, and you want to go in. You just had a tough series sweep against North Dakota, who, by the way, I saw some sentiment online, and I've voiced this sentiment in the past, and I still think it's true. Before we move off the non-conference talk completely, that the Beavers need to switch up their non-conference schedule every once and then. I think it's true.
The in-state rivalries are fun, of course.
Okay, North Dakota, you can keep playing them every year, right? And
yeah, that one makes sense.
I know why they do this. It's cheaper. It's easier for travel purposes. There's many different reasons why you do this, and because people do like seeing in-state rivalries played in college hockey. I don't think that the St. Cloud State and the UMDs are pulling people to the Sanford Center as much as they used to. I don't think that they are. North Dakota still does. You want to keep doing that one every year? I don't care. That's fine. And I don't want to sit on here and say, like, we can never beat these guys. We literally just won the season series against North Dakota last year. We won a game against Minnesota last year. Yes, we got swept by St. Cloud State. We won a game against Duluth last year in overtime. Granted, the Duluth wins and the St. Cloud State wins are very few and far between for whatever reason. Like, I feel like we beat North Dakota more often than we beat those other teams. And so it's hard for me to sit here and say, like, man, we never beat them anyways. So like we did last year. Now, it didn't help us last year anyways, but still, like, we did beat them. So I don't know. It just never seems to line up for the Beavers where, if they're good in the conference, they stink out of conference. And if they actually win some non-conference games, it doesn't matter because they're so bad in the conference anyways. But yeah, I just wanted to make a point there about we have beaten these guys. I would be fine, and it's only going to get worse, CJ, because guess what? St. Thomas is moving out of the CCHA, and we already have a home and home with them for this Thanksgiving weekend next season.
There's no reason to believe that they're going to leave the schedule anytime soon.
Yeah, so it's just they're going to add them into the rotation. Let's go.
Exactly, and since you lose a team from, you're basically setting that up to happen. So, which again, like Ian said, understand all the reasons for it's travel related, it's cost related. It does allow fans to see other barns and things like that. But, there's the case of, like, just to shake things up and get the boys seeing a different hockey sweater would be kind of nice. Obviously, Bemidji State had the icebreaker a couple of years ago where they had Army in Wisconsin, and that was really fun. And maybe that's, I know, logistically it can be a lot to put together and put on, but maybe seeing more of those or going to those or things like that just to beef it up. But it's also hard because, like you said, Ian, you run into that trap of, you make your bread and butter as a CCHA team on CCHA play. So, because even if you have a great non-conference wins and your slate, if you have kind of a mess up against Northern Michigan, it pretty much kind of can wipe away any of the gains you make either. So it's kind of that calculating nature as well.
Right. And that's what I think, like, sometimes it's like, well, what would we have to actually do, like, against this schedule that we played this year? Like, if we just split with all three of these teams, or like, say we split with St. Cloud and lose in overtime on Saturday night, and then you split against Duluth and maybe get swept. Like, how many wins is enough to prevent you from, like, you still have to play in the CCHA, and you can't afford to drop a game again, especially against Northern Michigan this year where they have no wins. So it's a whole conversation for another time, I'm sure. Back to Augustana. Yeah, like, big from the aspect of you're coming off of this sweep against North Dakota. You want to stay consistent in the conference play. Augustana is coming off of a rough weekend in Sault Ste. Marie. They split 3 points with the Lakers. They rescued 3 points from that series on Saturday night. They were down 1-0 late in the third period. They scored 2 goals in the final 6 minutes of the game to win that game. So they very well could have gotten swept on the road in the Sioux. So they're lucky and fortunate to come away with a lot of points. And it's going to be huge to try to keep pace with Minnesota State at the top of the conference. Minnesota State plays against Ferris State. So I don't know. I don't know what to expect from this series. Like, I don't really know how good Augustana is or isn't. They're really a weird team so far this year. They played really well in non-conference play, and ever since they've jumped into the CCHA play, they've been a very disappointing team, sitting, like you said, CJ, in just 5th place right now, middle of the pack. And that might only be because St. Thomas has some games in hand. So I really don't know what to make of this team. We did take 5 points off of them. Weirdly enough, we're playing them twice before, like, December just got started and we're going to play them twice.
Right. Exactly. And also
played.
There's like a month break after this. So like, it feels like a second season is starting in the new calendar year, but you've already wrapped up your season series against Augie. Just a weird quirk.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's not make this the weekend that they kind of get right before the winter break. Like, the Beavers have historically played pretty well heading into the winter break. I think last year it might have been the series against Michigan Tech where we didn't play well at all. That 9-5 loss or whatever that was that we took. That might have been the last series before winter break. But the couple years before that, they took 5 points off of Mankato, and then they took 5 points off of Bowling Green. So they do pretty well on this weekend historically. But those, you still got to go out and play. I'm having such a hard time with Augustana, man. I really don't know, especially this weekend, like going to Sault Ste. Marie and taking only 3 points. I can't even hate on that much because the Beavers don't play well there either. So, I mean, expectation-wise, I think if you got 3 points out of this, like last year you only got 2. You won in overtime and you lost in regulation. So that's 2 points. Like, if you can come away with 3, again, like most road series, if you come away with 3 points, you're probably going to be decently happy, as long as it's not, Northern Michigan or maybe Ferris State down at the bottom of the conference. But, I mean, if you can take majority of the points, again, from this Augustana team on the road and really keep pace with the top of this conference, it's really going to tell me a lot about this team heading into the second half of the season. Like, and you never know what can happen. We talked about that last week, I think, where it's just like, man, it feels like it's a completely different team sometimes when they have this much time off. But this would be huge to be able to go in to winter break, rebound off of the tough non-conference slate you had, and just get your mind right, get back in the swing of things. And it's a team they played pretty well against so far in their CCHA tenure. Like, it's hard to call it a revenge series now because we've already had the one series since the upset last year in the Mason Cup playoffs. But this could very well be a nice little rivalry bubbling, between these two teams. And you got to be able to pick up points on the road and go make that opposing student section a little bit angry to kind of get the blood boiling over.
Exactly. And by the way, when we look at keeping pace in the CCHA, if you look at Minnesota State, they host Ferris this weekend. So the Mavericks are going to be picking up some points this weekend. You're going to need to keep pace with them as you head into the break. Now, Minnesota State will play Augustana the following weekend on the 12th and 13th in Sioux Falls. So if you're Augustana too, this is a very important kind of 2-weekend stretch for them. You have two of the teams at the top of the CCHA coming into your barn in back-to-back weeks as they head into a holiday break. And this is kind of, again, this is why Bemidji State starting so well in conference play is important, because it allows you the ability kind of for buffer as the season goes on, where with the slow start from Augustana, if they, let's say, over these next opportunities, if they don't get majority points, they're pretty much done when it looks at top of the conference, McNaughton Cup. I know there's still, the top 4 seed, as we talked about on our show last week with Jared Urbeta of the Bemidji Pioneer, like the top 4 is really what's most important. But, if you want to compete for a McNaughton Cup, if you want to get yourself in that conversation, they have the opportunity to do that if they can have a really good couple back-to-back weeks here. So it's really important. And also, if you're Bemidji State and you take points from them and they play well against Mankato next week, well, that puts yourself in a good opportunity going into the break as well. So a lot hinges for all 3 of these teams over the next couple weekends, and it'll just be really fascinating to see how it works out. But the point being, Mankato's playing Ferris this weekend at home. They're going to get majority points, and not that you have to leapfrog them this weekend, but again, keep yourself within kind of a weekend's amount of points, and you should be pretty good heading down the home stretch in 2026.
Yeah, exactly. Coming up, January, a month from now is really when we're going to start focusing on the standings even more. We bring it up now just because it's fun. The Beavers are at the top of the standings. Of course,
right, exactly.
Bring it up. But this, coming down the back stretch of the season, once January hits, that's when we really start kind of thinking scenarios and really start caring more about what happens around the CCHA, even more than we already do. Which, speaking of which, before we move on from men's hockey, I don't know how much you have left to say. I do wonder if we have a second to just throw Michigan Tech some shade quick, CJ.
On this program, always.
Yeah, so the Huskies have really been having a hard time lately. I'm starting to almost feel bad for them. No, I'm not. I think they've taken 4 points from their last 6 conference games, which is abysmal. Of course, 3 of those were against the Beavers a couple of weeks ago. Then they go to Mankato and they get swept 6-0 over the weekend. No points at all. They come back home against St. Thomas this last weekend. Friday night, they were 1.2 seconds away from taking home 3 points, and they allow a goal because they lost like 4 straight face-offs. I was watching this game on the TV as I had the Beaver game up on my laptop, and they lost like 4 straight offensive zone face-offs, and St. Thomas scored like on the 4th opportunity and took it to overtime with 1.2 seconds left on the clock. Tie game, goes to a shootout. St. Thomas takes 2 points, and then they come back and they do not have a response on Saturday, again in Houghton, and they drop 3 points again. So they get 1 point. 1 point from their last 4 conference games, 4 points from their last 6 conference games. So the Huskies are struggling, to say the least.
You hate to see it. You really
hate
do.
to see it, man. I hate to say I told you so. We were sitting here before the preview of our series with them. I brought up like, well, the 2 teams they've played are Ferris State and Northern Michigan. Maybe that's why they have 12 points through 4 games. And here they are with 16 points through 10 games, sitting all the way back in 4th place in the conference. And they very well could get jumped if we can't handle Augustana this weekend. Augustana could leapfrog them, and St. Thomas very well could as well. So, we just had to throw some hate at St. St. Thomas could have some coming their way too, but Michigan Tech especially after everything we've had to put up with them for the past 4 to 5 years.
It couldn't have happened to a better program.
Well, we'll see. It's not over. We do have to play them again this year. So
we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So, looking to it this series before we completely close the book on men's hockey here, I do want to take a look at the goals scored per game. If you look so far through the first kind of handful of conference games, Bemidji State is 3rd in the CCHA, averaging 3.3 goals per game. Now, obviously, if you want to go to the series against Alaska Anchorage and things like that, that'll boost it up a little bit. But generally speaking, Bemidji State has one of the top scoring offenses in the conference. When you look at goals allowed per game, Bemidji State averaging about 2.67 goals allowed. When you look at Augustana, Bemidji State right now, the fourth, kind of ranked fourth in goals allowed per game. Augustana is second. They average under 2 goals allowed per game defensively. Offensively for the Vikings as well, they're kind of still going through it. They average about 2.46 goals per game. So it'll kind of depend. Can Bemidji State get the offense going, or will Augustana kind of drag them into that low scoring affair? Kind of what Bemidji State typically likes to do to teams is kind of drag in the mud with them. But it'll be interesting to see if Bemidji State's offense can crack the goaltending of Augustana throughout this. So it's going to be very fascinating to see kind of how that shakes up through the weekend.
Yeah, Josh Kotai, one of the best goaltenders in the country, as well as in the CCHA. It was pretty low scoring. The Beavers only got 4 goals the last time these two teams met. Remember, the first game of the series was a 1-0 win in overtime. The Beavers did not score in regulation, and then they scored 3 goals in a 3-2 win on Friday night. One thing, too, to keep an eye on is the penalty killing of Augustana. They are tops in the conference right now at 89.5%. This is partially a Josh Kotai stat and partially just a good defensive structure statistic. I can't remember exactly what it was, but dude, it was like really bad. I don't think we scored a power play goal. When we did that, we had 5 power plays on the Friday night, went 0 for 5. And then on Saturday night, we had 4 power plays. So we went 0 for 9 on the power play in that series. So anything better than that on the power play would be great. And again, this is before we got our power play figured out, but Augustana still does have a very, very good penalty kill. So that's special teams. It's always important, but this weekend feels ultra important.
Exactly. So we'll see how that goes this week, and then we'll be back to recap it here on next week's show. Ian, we are going to get ready to talk a little women's hockey and, of course, men's and women's basketball getting going as we are into the kind of thick of the winter sports only schedule here. But first, want to take a second to give a good shout out to the folks at Bemidji State Alumni and Foundation, because once a Beaver, always a Beaver. The Bemidji State Alumni and Foundation is here to keep that green and white pride going strong for its 50,000 graduates around the world. From scholarships that open doors for students, events that bring BSU alumni and friends together, you can get connected, give back, and leave a legacy at Bemidji State. Whether you're a proud BSU grad, a local supporter, or you just love cheering on the Beavers, come be a part of the action at bsualumni.org. That's bsualumni.org. bsualumni.org. Bemidji State Alumni and Foundation, proud supporters of the Beaver Banter podcast. Okay, Ian, so women's hockey had an opportunity, again, a non-conference on the road, which is never easy, but they had an opportunity to take on Lindenwood just to try and get some confidence going. And, you look at the early game, they had they come away, I should say, with a loss 4-7 on Friday night in the early game. And then on Saturday afternoon had a 2-2 tie in overtime. And yeah, I think you would have hoped coming in there that maybe you could have gotten a win. You didn't want to predict the sweep, but just overall to come away with some positive vibes. And while I think there are some things you can hang your hat on, I think overall, maybe a missed opportunity in the sense of trying to get some confidence heading into a top 5 matchup this weekend at home against Minnesota Duluth.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a little disappointing just from the fact that you're coming off of a pretty good win against St. Cloud State the weekend before, and you're playing a Lindenwood team that has a bunch of conference opponents that are
like opponents,
yeah, familiar opponents with you that have had a lot of success against the Lions this year. And I know you're on the road, and it's a pretty long road trip down to Maryland Heights, Missouri, but yeah, to come away with only a tie is a little disappointing. You would have liked at least a split on the weekend just to at least say, hey, we won an extra game and now we're at 5. And I think we won 6 all of last season. So to get at, 5 before before December hits would have been awesome. But, it is what it is. you still have a couple more opportunities out of conference against Merrimack coming up at the beginning of January. But yeah, I mean, the 7 goals is maybe the more disappointing thing on the weekend. If you lose a 3-2 hockey game or something like that, it's maybe a little different than allowing 7 goals. Now, one of them was an empty netter, but like I said, you don't want to see that type of a defensive effort from the Beaver women's hockey team, especially against a team like Lindenwood. But it is what it is, man. That's why you play the game, right? You can't just these guys are also looking at the schedule and saying, "Oh, Bemidji State, like that's a team we can beat." And unfortunately, that's where we are. We're I think still climbing. We're giving Coach Fricklin some more time here to get some players in here, and I do think that even with some of the results this year, like they lost to St. Thomas, and instead of sweeping them at home like last year, it still feels like maybe they're trending in the right direction. Maybe I'm just a little bit ranked win pilled, where they didn't have one of those last year.
Right.
And even that was like, okay, well, we blew like a 4-0 lead in that game still somehow and still won. But at the end of the day, I have more confidence in this team this year to go out and potentially like take points off of Minnesota Duluth this weekend, right? Like last year, I would have gone into this weekend and been like, all right, well, let's chalk it up and just move into the holiday break, man. Because I like last year, there was almost no chance that you come away with any points against any of these ranked opponents. But I don't know. You're at home again against Minnesota Duluth, and I don't know. I think there's a chance that you come away with some points in this if you can do it against St. Cloud State. Duluth is a lot better than St. Cloud State this year, both men's and women's. But if not now, when? As we say almost every week on this podcast. So. I don't know.
Why not us? Why not now?
Yeah, exactly. So I do like the offensive output, 6 goals on the weekend. I don't think I'll ever complain about that. Like, yeah, you'd love like 12 goals on the weekend, but I just feel like that's probably not the more realistic option. Same as they had 2 weeks ago. They had 6 goals against St. Cloud State. So,
right.
And if we can get to 6 goals total against Minnesota Duluth, that'll give you a chance to get some points. That'll give you a chance.
Exactly. So, you chalk it up, you see hopefully that defensive game, goaltending, things like that can just slowly start to improve over the course of the year, because it's just been something and obviously the offensive game too over last year and the year before, you could say like needs to be up there too. But also, you just look at the goal differential for Bemidji State and you just want it to look a little cleaner right now. When you look at goals allowed in terms of goals scored, it's in the bottom of in the WCHA. And, not that we're expecting Bemidji State to have a positive goal differential and it's going to be huge all season long, even on most of the teams that basically, unless you're kind of the 3, Minnesota, Ohio State, Wisconsin, your goal differential is probably going to be about even or a little bit below that. And for Bemidji State, I'm not saying it's got to be right there, but how can you bridge that gap? You're going to finish with a negative goal differential this season, but how much can you get it? How close can you get it to that even split from now to the rest of the year? And that'll be something just to keep an eye on. You just look at the goals allowed and sometimes, and I get it. They play some great hockey teams. So I'm not trying to say that like it's all on them or anything like that, but you got to find a way just to allow fewer goals. I mean, there's my normie hockey take of the day is just, don't let them score. But that'll be something to watch for this team, is the improvement of that and the steady gains that they could get in terms of that. I'm not saying it's all in net. I'm not saying it's all defensively. It's just how things shake out. But how can you improve that side of the ice? How can you improve that as best you can throughout the end of the year? And like you said, Ian, as Coach Fricklin tries to get in a full group of her players and trying to get her vision, and it still takes time, like we mentioned on last week's show. So just the state of where things are at, and we'll keep monitoring the situation as the year goes on. Again, like the men's team, Bemidji State women's hockey will go on a break. They're going to play next on January 3rd and 4th at Merrimack in Massachusetts, and then they are going to get back into WCHA play on January 9th and 10th against St. Thomas at the Lee and Penny Anderson Arena. So that's the schedule right now for women's hockey. Ian, let's flip the script and let's take a look at men's and women's basketball, starting off with the men's basketball side of things, going all the way back to their conference game against UMD at Romano Gym. It was a 77-67 loss. Bemidji State hanging right with it throughout the course of the game. It was a really fun back and forth first half, a ton of lead changes, a ton of things happening. And then Bemidji State was down 3 points going into halftime. And then UMD just able to build on that a little bit and able to come away with the win. One thing of note in the game, Tate Olson did leave with an injury. He logged just 12 minutes in the game and or 15 minutes in the game, scoring 12 points, which still overall was fourth on the team that night, but had to leave. And as of kind of my last check, did not appear in a game over the holiday tournament. So it'll be interesting to monitor how that injury is, but he did leave the game and didn't come back. So we'll see how long he could potentially be out for, or if they're just trying to, kind of keep things on the slow side as they try and ramp up. But Bemidji State loses 77-67, just couldn't quite get the second chance points in the glass. And there were just things of that nature where UMD was really good in that aspect, and they just gave themselves extra opportunities to be able to give themselves an opportunity to win. So not the result that you want for the Beavers, but I think there's still a couple things. That's a quality opponent in UMD. You had a good fought game against them. And, you feel like even though you didn't perform that well on the glass, and I'm trying to find that stat, and also the second chance points, you still feel like there was an opportunity for them to have a good game in there as well. So I'm trying to find.
They didn't get out rebounded that badly. It was 30-28 in favor of UMD, but the offensive rebounding for UMD was 14 to just 4 for the Beavers. So
right.
That's a big deal when you are giving up plus 10 in the offensive glass category. Overall, I do agree, CJ. I think this is a pretty good result. Like, for Tate Olson to go out, that's a big player, to lose for this team, an offensive catalyst. And to play this well, I think UMD is probably the front runner right now. I mean, obviously it's one game in, but they do have the best record out of the conference in the NSIC North. So I do think this is one of the top teams in the North Division this season. So to go on the road and get a 10-point loss where you did play competitively with them after losing one of your better players, I can't say that I'm too disappointed. Like, yeah, I mean, I love to beat Duluth. Trust me. I want to beat them every chance I get. But
yes,
first conference game of the season, decent sign. It could have been a lot worse.
Right, exactly. And then they move into their holiday slate of games, and Bemidji State overall getting a win against St. Leo University, 87-80, and then took on a very good Florida Southern College team, not the Moes, but they are the Mocks, moccasins. That's what we learned on last week's show. But overall, a really good effort for the Beavers. Again, no appearance from Tate Olson, but this was a team that was ranked 18th in the country as you got ready to take them on. And you were down by 9 at halftime, had a nice second half where you did outscore them 50-48, and you end up losing by 7. It happens. But overall, against a really good showing, when you're taking on a team that's number 18 in the country, you had to go from one side of the country to the other to play them. And you have a good effort like that. I think it's just a really good sign. Again, without Tate Olson, you were still able to have this good of an effort. Coming away with 25 points was John Pekarich. We also had Henry Shannon III coming away with 24 points, Austin Josephson, 20 points, and Nathan Fensky, 15. So overall, when you look at the things that decided this game, Florida Southern had 15 3-pointers, and that's just something that they were able to do really well against from the 3-point line. They shot a lot. They weren't efficient with Florida Southern. They only shot 34%. It was still a good number, I guess. But Bemidji State from 3 shot 52.6%. Overall, just looked to be turnovers. Bemidji State had 15 turnovers offensively, and Florida Southern only had 6. So just giving that team extra possessions is really kind of what was your downfall. So something to clean up. And again, those are some of the easily correctable things as you go through the early part of the schedule, in theory.
Yeah, absolutely. Overall, not a bad weekend. You said that Florida Southern was ranked 18th in the country?
Ranked 8. That's what BSUBeavers.com says. Yeah, they were ranked 18th in the country in playing that game.
All right. Well, that's cool. I didn't know that. So that is a better result than, you're playing a ranked team. It's, a Bemidji State team that we I don't know if I think that they're rank worthy, like necessarily, especially not yet in the season, but
Not a
to
3
see
and 3
them
now, but
to see them perform like that against a team of that caliber is a good thing. And yeah, I mean, John Pekarich, in that win, by the way, 35 points. CJ,
he's
5 of
become a
9
really nice
3-point
player,
shooter.
really important player for this team.
Yeah. Yeah. 2 steals as well. Henry Shannon Jr. Have yourself a holiday tournament, over 20 points in both games. Did Pekarich have 25 on
He had
Saturday?
24 in the Saturday game. I believe he had 24. Hold on. Let me.
So both of those guys.
25.
Yeah, both of those guys over 20 points in both of those games. Pretty good, man. Pretty good. And when you lose a player like Tate Olson, you need some guys to step up, and those two certainly did it over the course of the weekend. So I'm excited. Conference play right here, right now. It's
coming up Thursday.
It's upon us. Thursday, Saturday. We talked about a lot of Thursday, Saturdays.
Right. That kind of seems to be the default format. And we talked about that on earlier shows. But again, seems like they're given a day of travel, just a day of practice in between, which I don't hate, actually. So it'll be weird. But I think overall that could be a good thing for the NSIC. But
I also like it because no hockey on Thursday. You know what I mean? Like,
you're not
so
kind of, you don't have to overcommit.
Yeah, so many times, like all the way back to when we were going to school. It's like, man, I have season tickets for hockey. I'd love to go to more basketball games, but if they're both home, like I'm going to the one I already paid for. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Hey,
I got paid to watch basketball games when I went to Bemidji State, so that was my plus. But yeah, I mean, you're right. It's able to potentially get more students to come in, especially when those games now on Saturdays kind of moved to the earlier afternoon as well. When you look at Minnesota State, that's your first kind of. I played UMD last week, but as you go into the rest of the season is conference, and when you look at your first matchup, it's against Minnesota State, which is Moorhead, which has been a pretty good basketball school over the last 20 years plus. So they've been a really good program. They are going to continue to be a good program. But again, it's a good bellwether for your team as you get ready for that full slate, because then you have a game against Crookston, which hasn't been as winnable as it should be every single year. But in theory, see how you stack up against Minnesota Moorhead, and then on Saturday, get a win over Crookston, and then you go to Jamestown and Northern, and then you kind of see how the schedule breaks down for you. But this will be a really interesting bellwether against a typically pretty good Minnesota State University Moorhead team.
Yeah, I'm looking at their schedule right now, trying to piece together anything I can. And of course, it's difficult in college hoops because we don't have as much experience with out-of-conference teams as we do. Like, you kind of know in football who the better D2 teams are. It's easy to tell, like, when a team is scheduling a cupcake. Moorhead has a pretty ugly loss to Washburn University. They have a loss to Pittsburgh State University. They beat Black Hills State University. They beat the South Dakota School of Mines. They have a couple of wins against Minnesota Crookston. It looks like they played in some sort of holiday tournament in Minnesota and St. Paul. They played Southwest, and they lost to Concordia in overtime, 108-111. High scoring affair there. So I don't know, that gives me hope that Crookston, is maybe down after. Was it Crookston or was it no? Minot had a really good year last year where they were kind of up. So Crookston, yeah. Let's hope to get a win there. And then, you're at home. This would be a really big win to build off of, especially if you're trying to make it back to the NSIC conference tournament. These wins against Minnesota Moorhead are going to be essential. And just because it's early in the season doesn't mean it counts any differently than the ones later in the year. So, hey, if we can go out and get a sweep this weekend, I am all aboard the hype train for men's basketball.
Interesting breakdown of the numbers here. Bemidji State is 37-37 all time at home against MSUM. On the road, they're 19-50. So you have your chance at the BSU gymnasium. This is a good opportunity. Bemidji State has lost 4 in a row to the Dragons. Their last win, I believe, came February 11th of 2023. It was an 88-87 win in the matchup. But I suppose I can just look at it right here. It was that 88-87 win at BSU gymnasium. So, and then of course, if you remember, wasn't it that, am I remembering this right, Ian? Wasn't that the season where Bemidji State had the run in the conference tournament, and it was in this conference semifinal game where MSUM wasn't a buzzer beater, but basically was a shot at the buzzer to kind of sink it for the Dragons.
It was a buzzer beater, actually.
It might, yeah, actually it was a buzzer. Dang it, making me relive that game.
I don't think I remember us having a chance to like heave one.
No, yeah, I think that's right. I think it was at the buzzer down at the Pentagon in Sioux Falls. That was a great basketball game. I really thought Bemidji State was a team of destiny in that NSIC tournament in 2023. They got the upset win over Northern, I believe, before that, and they set themselves up. Really, it was. I felt like it was a team with Wayne. Yes, that's right. It was Wayne. So, yeah, it really did feel like Bemidji State was that team of destiny in 2023. So, why not get some revenge for that game? Because that's kind of been the start of this losing streak against
and here's the thing too, like the Beavers can benefit from this new look conference like layout. Like in the past, like last year was difficult because not only did you have to be better than the bottom two teams in your own division, you had to be, within the top whatever teams in the whole conference. And they made the playoffs last year, of course, and they lost in the first round. Was it to Sioux Falls again?
I think it was St. Cloud State.
Yes, last year was St. Cloud State. 2 years ago was Sioux Falls.
Yep.
But it's going to be very interesting because I do think the bottom of the North is potentially a little bit better or a little bit worse than the bottom middle section of the NSIC South. So the Beavers might get a little bit of a benefit there where you can maybe get to hosting another playoff game potentially in the first round of the NSIC playoffs.
Right.
If not, we'll see where the season takes us. We're only one game in and we're 0-1, so let's not talk too crazy now, but maybe we get one of those top two seeds and we don't even have to play until we get to the Pentagon.
Exactly. So
knock on wood.
Knocking on wood profusely. So as we take a look here, we're going to talk a little women's hoops because they had a game against UMD. They also had a holiday tournament we're going to break down. But first, Ian, a message for the good folks at the Bemidji State Alumni and Foundation.
Do you want to be a part of the team behind the teams at Bemidji State? Join hundreds of dedicated fans when you donate to Beaver Athletics and help BSU pursue its next championship. Your gift can power your favorite program, establish a scholarship for a student athlete you get to meet, and so much more. Every dollar brings the Beavers closer to raising another trophy. You can add to the proud tradition of success at Bemidji State. So don't wait. Give today at bsualumni.org/Beavers. That's bsualumni.org/Beavers.
All right, so Bemidji State women's basketball, they have their game against UMD. They got down by as much as 10 points early on in that first quarter. Able to battle back at the game. I can't remember if it was tied, but at the very least get it within a possession or two. And unfortunately, you just couldn't quite mount the comeback, and they lost in their first conference game of the season, 74-63. At Romano Gym in Duluth. They then got a win 68-58 at the Tampa Thanksgiving Classic in Tampa, Florida, with their first game against the Florida Institute of Technology. And in that one, Bemidji State able to get their one win in the tournament. They would then lose to the host team the next day. But looking over Bemidji State, they ended up having 10-28 from three, which helped out. So kind of the big thing there for them. And overall, as you look at it, there was just a team that was led by Taryn Plash, who had 16 points, including 4 threes, which definitely helped, 7 rebounds, a couple steals. And looking at that, just a very good performance from Plash, who we knew was going to be somebody that this team was going to lean on, and to see her kind of be not the team's leading scorer. I don't have that stat right in front of me, but at least be somebody whose name you're hearing kind of as some of the top point scorers on the night. Certainly a good sign to see early on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anytime you can go and get a win non-conference like that isn't against Valley City State or, Minnesota Morris, like it's gonna wake me up a little bit. I'm gonna start taking notice. And honestly, the game against Duluth too, you lost by 11. Last year I saw some worse numbers than that, and I'm a little bit intrigued. I want to see more. I need to see a little more data, but I'm starting to think that this women's team might be a little bit improved from last year, and especially offensively. I've seen some pretty good offensive outputs. Obviously, Tampa is a pretty good team, and to only put up 49 in that game is
and it ended up being, if we're looking at that Tampa game, to a 9-point fourth quarter. So you were in it right at the end. You just kind of were minus 15 in that fourth quarter. So ran out of gas a little bit against a good team. But for the most, through the first 3 quarters, you're right in that game, which is like you're talking about.
Exactly. And so, you head into conference play now, and you got to win under your belt this last weekend in the holiday tournaments. And, you got to go down to Florida and kind of recharge after it started to get cold up north here. And I'm sure that was nice for both teams, really. Well, were the men's in Florida too?
They were in Florida. Yeah. They just were in different parts.
Not in Tampa. But, hey, it is what it is. You got 2 games coming up, same opponents as the men. MSU Moorhead sitting 4-1 on the season, 1-0 in conference play. Minnesota Crookston 1-5 on the season, so that's going to be another very
big opportunity.
Like we talked about with the men's, now again you're in a little bit better spot, especially on the women's side, right? Where it's now you don't have to be in the top 12 in your conference, you just have to be in the top 6 of your division to make the tournament. And Crookston is going to be one of those teams down towards the bottom of the conference at the end of the year that you're definitely going to want to be ahead of in the North. This is a huge game for that implication of potentially making it to the postseason for the first time in what would be a while. CJ, I don't exactly have the data in front of me on that, but it's been a few years since they've been there. So I think that would be a huge step for this program to take back in the right direction to get, again, more towards where we saw them back in the 2017, 2018 days before COVID kind of hit and it really derailed this program. And they're still trying to find their footing. But I'm excited. Moorhead's going to be tough, as they always are. But I do think that there's opportunity in the air against Minnesota Crookston, especially.
Yeah, that feels like the one where if you want to start to build that momentum again, getting conference win number 1 against Crookston would be a huge way to do that. And again, maybe I just don't quite remember everything from a year ago from that Minnesota Crookston team, but it really does feel like a completely different team than what it was just even a couple seasons ago when you look at some of the things that they were able to do. Because if you remember, there was a Tormanen who had played really well for Minnesota Crookston. She from Monaga High School fame. And then, of course, they had a really big commit in Willow Teal, who is from Perham, one of the better girls basketball players in Minnesota, who, again, upon my check, is not on their active roster. So, whether she transferred or whatever, I guess I don't have that information top of mind, but it really does feel like a Crookston program that had a little momentum going, maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. And now over the last couple seasons is really trying to pick up the pieces and trying to rebuild themselves and rework their own image. So it'll be really fascinating to see because this feels like a really good opportunity for the Beavers to get conference win number 1. I don't want to call it. I don't want to say that like, hey, that's going to happen, but it really does feel like this is a game. I know it's on the road, but it really does feel like a game where you hope Bemidji State can get a victory on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, the last time you beat either of these teams 2 seasons ago at home, you beat Moorhead in Bemidji 65-54. And I think it was also 2 seasons ago. It must have been like the same week. Yeah. The win against Moorhead was the 3rd of February, 2024. The win against Crookston was on the road on February 8th. So the last time you beat these teams, you were in Bemidji against Moorhead, and you were in Crookston against Crookston. I'm just saying, let's make that happen again. Let's get a sweep. That would be pretty sweet. Obviously, don't want to get too ahead of myself here, but hey, why not come home with like 4 wins? This weekend, 4 wins we can talk about between both basketball programs for next week's show. Let's do that. That would be fun to talk about.
Let's get some good vibes rolling. Let's keep it going. Let's see what happens. They both got splits over their tournament week, so they both can feel like, hey, we got some things to build off of. We got some things to improve on, but hey, right in the thick of things, and that's really all you can ask. We're not sitting here expecting NSIC titles or anything, but hey, throughout the course of the basketball season, can you be competitive night in and night out and give yourself an opportunity come conference tournament time? That's really, this is just a really nice conference for men's and women's basketball. So if you can put yourself in the mix with some of the better teams in the country, you're going to be sitting in a really good spot. So, all right. I think that's going to do it as we wrap things up here on today's Beaver Banter podcast. Ian, any other notes that come to mind for Bemidji State athletics as we try and wrap things up here for today?
Shout out Gunnar Olszewski, man. He got his bell rung. He got the words Bemidji State on Monday Night Football's broadcast. So it came in a little bit of a, we don't want to see it happen that way.
It's not the best context the means by which it happened were not ideal, but
hope he's all right. Genuinely, like anytime you get hit that hard that the side of your helmet, the decal gets knocked off, like that's
right.
Tough, but
there's the term, right? He got his bell rung, and sometimes people kind of throw it around loosely. That might be like a textbook definition of getting his bell rung. Like, dude, I'm sorry not to make light of it. I hope he's okay. But
right.
Oh man, like you saw it happen, and that's one where you're watching it live and just like audibly go, "Oh!"
Yeah.
Like
they made up some BS about like, "Oh, this is why there wasn't a flag. It's because he's a runner and not a." It's like, what? Huh?
The dude came like taken off, crashing in. Yeah, I don't know,
man.
I don't get it. But yeah, hopefully Gunnar's okay. Obviously, he's a tough dude. Like, made his bones about being a good punt returner. And of course, at Bemidji State, famously never fair caught the football. So he's not a dude he knows what he signed up for. He's used to this, but yeah, not great for him. Hopefully he's okay. I didn't really watch like the rest of the game because by halftime it was pretty well in the bag for New England. So I kind of stopped watching. So I didn't know if Gunnar went back in the game or not. I'm guessing they probably just took him out and hopefully he's okay. I don't know what it is about being a member of the New York Giants that just makes you more susceptible to getting concussed. Maybe they just follow their quarterback, Jackson Dart. I don't know. But.
Dude, that guy's a moron, bro. Oh my God. Did you see the hit that he took on the sideline? Like
I did not, but I've seen the discourse on social media.
You just came back off a concussion. Everybody's been telling you to watch yourself for weeks. And even
John Gruden, who's like a known football sociopath, is like, dude, you got
blown up on the sideline. Like, it's like, dude, just step out of bounds. And then if he hits you, it's a penalty at least. But it was like a clean hit because you didn't go out of bounds.
That guy is not going to have to give any money back to the NFL. Like, you made, exactly. You're not doing yourself any favors throughout that. Yeah. So, good job, Jackson Dart. Your brain is going to be exactly everybody brought up that Josh Allen quote where he's like, I know what I signed up for. Like, talks about CTE. Man. Not ideal. I don't want Jackson Dart to get another concussion, but Jameis Winston football has at least vibes. Heck, if Gunnar comes back, maybe they just put him in at QB. So no, he can do it. The other thing to quickly get out here before the show is over, Bemidji State women's track and field dropped their indoor schedule. So to take a look at that, you can go to bsubeavers.com for kind of the full lineup of things that are happening, but they're going to have their first meet coming up like a week from Thursday at the Dakota Alumni Classic in Fargo. And then they're off until January, which is really when that indoor season picks up, January, February. And then it's a very quick indoor track and field season, but they have the Twin Ports open in Superior on January 17th. They're going to go to Grand Forks. They go to Fargo again. They're going to go to Mankato. And then, of course, the indoor championships in Mankato on February 27th and 28th. So you can check out their full schedule at bsubeavers.com, but that's some other news here as we get ready. So
also quick shout out Max Hildebrand. I know we're running out of time, but freshman goaltender going into a game at the Ralph played really well. I really was impressed with what he did, especially coming off of an injury from last weekend and seeing his first game time in a couple of weeks. I was pretty impressed with the freshman in an environment like that. So shout out him.
If you want to see and hear somebody geek out about goaltending, go to our interview with Jared Rubedo, Bemidji Pioneer sports editor. He was very excited, giddy, might I add, to talk goaltending and Rathan Robbins and Hildebrand and things like that. So go check out that conversation again. You know, we don't talk a ton about the UND series. It's kind of more general stuff. So you can go back and listen to that anytime if you want to get filled in on BSU hockey. And till then, we'll see you next time. I'm CJ Baumgartner, Ian Rivers over there. This has been the Beaver Banter Podcast. See ya.